Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside the Newsroom. I'm Maddie Paul. Inside the Newsroom, we give you a look at the trending stories in the KELOLAND area, and we give you an exclusive look at how our newsroom staff members create the stories that you see every day. Now, this is the second day that Inside the Newsroom has launched on KELOLAND Plus. And this is all really exciting to just use this digital desk and to see what we can explore with this exclusive content. So if you're new to Inside the Newsroom, hello. We have a newsroom staff member just sit right across from me in the empty space that you see now, and they just give a behind-the-scenes look at how they put their stories together, their passions, and even their experiences at when they went out to go do the story or how they produce a newscast together. There's a lot of elements that go into our storytelling here in KELOLAND, and this is a way, this show, to show you exactly what that looks like. In fact, our reporter and anchor, Kelly Vogt, gave us a really good inside look at Inside the Newsroom.
Each day, the KELOLAND news staff reports the news, weather, and sports you need to know. But what exactly goes into a story that you watch on TV or read on our website? Now, there's a new show taking you behind the scenes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Inside the Newsroom.
KELOLAND digital reporter Maddie Paul is the host of the program. Each 30-minute episode will feature interviews with newsroom staff members about their stories.
I like to think of the show as a podcast almost. It's very conversational, and that's how it should feel. It's very comfortable.
For example, here, Paul is interviewing reporter Carly Phillips about her recent story about Public Information Officer Sam Clemens' upcoming retirement from the Sioux Falls Police Department.
For me, I really wanted to focus on, okay, what has Sam done and what exactly is his role?
We have more than 50 full-time people in our news department, so there's a lot of people contributing, a lot of talent and a lot of expertise, and introducing those to viewers in a way they haven't seen before is really exciting.
Inside the Newsroom is available now on KELOLAND Plus, a new app that allows you to watch live news, special broadcasts, and video on demand for free.
You know, we got our start with 6 o'clock appointment television where the family would gather around and watch the news. And while lots of people still do that, and that's still very important, this is a way we can reach viewers in a whole new way. You don't need to have cable. You don't need to subscribe. You can download this app for free.
And Inside the Newsroom is just the start of what's to come on KELOLAND Plus.
I feel like there is a level of relatability that you can find while watching this show. And you also just get that look of who the reporter or who the photog or who the producer is. And you understand that they're a person too. Feeling really grateful for that story that was created by Kelly Vogt and also for just hosting Inside the Newsroom. So thank you for watching right now, and we're going to get started with your trending stories. New this morning, Dusty Johnson's campaign is dismissing Toby Doden's gubernatorial candidacy after Doden had described himself as good and Johnson as evil. And we do have a statement that Johnson's office did give KELOLAND News. If you're interested in reading that, you can find this story on KELOLAND.com. In our next story, the impact of Minnesota's weekend shooting is stretching across state borders. South Dakota state legislators released a joint statement showing their support for their neighboring lawmakers as well as their families.
Minnesota is 15 miles from our border, so it's kind of like they're our cousin, you know? And so when I realized that and it started to sink in really what had happened, it was really just shocking.
Vance Bolter is accused of shooting and killing former Minnesota Democratic House Speaker Melissa Hortman, as well as her husband. He's also accused of shooting and hurting Senator John Hoffman and his wife. Up next, July 1st is just around the corner, and with that comes a slate of new laws for South Dakota. More than 190 bills signed by Governor Larry Roden will go into effect at the turn of the calendar. If you're interested in reading and knowing which bills will be going into law, all 190, find this story on KELOLAND.com. In our next story, there's going to be a big benefit later this month for the family of Casey Wilson of Flandreau. Wilson died in a car crash earlier this month on I-90. His friends say Casey impacted so many people's lives with his country music, his horses, and just being a good old cowboy.
When I heard about what happened, I reflected back on everything that he did for me. And the word that came to my mind was legend. he's a legend, you know, like a local legend, Midwest legend, like overall just a legend.
That was his brother talking. There's going to be a big fundraiser, and you can learn more about it by finding this story on KELOLAND.com. And tonight on KELOLAND News, our reporter and anchor Dan Santello will report on how several inches of rain in the Sisseton area is flooding in the Minnesota River. And as we keep an eye on our weather, here's a look at one of our sky cams. As we keep a look on this summertime weather, heat and humidity is making its comeback. Meteorologist Scott Munt has a look at what is expected later this week.
The combination of heat and humidity will bring the heat index back later this week. The heat index is what it feels like, much like when we used wind chill in the winter. And just like winter's temperature extremes, you'll want to be safe when outdoors in the heat. High air and dew point temperatures will bring the heat index to 100 plus at times for the later part of the week and for the weekend, and it will take its toll on you if you're not careful. On days with low humidity, the body reacts better, as the dry air allows for better sweat evaporation. It's the evaporation process that helps to cool the body. High humidity limits that rate of evaporation when you sweat. This makes us feel more uncomfortable. Here's some advice when it comes to heat. Drink plenty of water and avoid alcohol. Remember to apply sunscreen every 2 hours. Wear light, loose-fitting clothes and take regular breaks when outdoors. The heat will break the following week with well below average temperatures. It's just a matter of timing that cooler air. For KELOLAND Weather, I'm meteorologist Scott Munt.
Still to come on Inside the Newsroom, we are bringing in a digital reporter to talk about a story that they created, and it involves animals. We're talking about a snapping turtle when we come back on Inside the Newsroom. Stay with us. Hello and welcome back to Inside the Newsroom. Now, a story that was trending on Monday was the discovery of a large snapping turtle in an Aberdeen grocery store parking lot. Joining me now is Ray Yost, who uncovered the details of this large mammoth dinosaur. Ray, when you look at the photos of this, it's a turtle, right? It's a snapping turtle. You're like, this is a dinosaur. It is huge. I want to show you a photo that Ray had found. This was from a social media post from the mayor, right, Ray?
Yes, correct. The mayor took that in the parking lot. And it does look like a dinosaur. Look at the features, the claws, I suppose, in the shell. It's wild.
And how big did you discover this snapping turtle was as you were putting the story together?
They estimated it was more than 40 pounds. I'm sure they didn't put it on a scale or anything, but I think they looked at the width and breadth of it and said this could be about 40 pounds or a little more.
Yeah, and why do they think that the snapping turtle was at the grocery store lot?
Well, it's June, and the experts that I talked to said if it's June or July, it's a good chance, or it's most likely going to be a female looking for a place to nest or lay eggs. So it traveled from wherever its home was to a suitable nesting place, and across that it landed in the parking lot.
Ray, as I was reading your story, one thing that I was very impressed by was the number of voices that you had in your story.
Yeah.
You had the mayor, you had South Dakota Game Fish and Parks, you had somebody from the library in Aberdeen, or just multiple voices coming together to bring out the facts of what this situation could have been and why and how, And so my question for you is, as you're putting together a story like this, were you just innately interested in learning these types of facts and you just wanted to translate that in your story? Or did you think that these are all the facts that needed to be put out there?
Well, my approach is if you're going to do a story on a fairly large snapping turtle, you can make it small and just do a story, snapping turtle was found. But if I consider that, I have lots of questions. Why was it there, like you asked? What was it doing? So I set out to find out more about snapping turtles. I learned more than I ever expected to. I mean, I cast kind of a wide net, which is what you want to do. You want to try to have multiple sources. And in this case, lots of folks called me back, so it was great. But I was interested to learn more about if it was female or male and why it would be there, and just, how old they can get and how big they can get, and the habitat, the terrain of Aberdeen kind of contributed to that. So if I had those questions, I figured, listeners and readers would have those as well.
That's a great point. And Ray, one thing that's sticking out to me that you just said is you got the calls back. Sometimes in the newsroom, it could be a little bit difficult to get multiple voices like you had for your story. So could you explain a little bit about why so many voices brings a story together and really fleshes it out?
I think in this case, there's not a lot of written research on snapping turtles. And I didn't really know that. But when I started to search, I realized, okay, there's not a lot of written research, or there's not a lot recorded. So you want multiple voices just because you want to make sure you get as much information. And then, that can tell you about the turtle. But also, in general, in any story, the more information you have, the more sources, if you can, get them, it just backs up and reinforces every fact or every educated guess or theory that someone may have about this, in this case, the turtle. So you start with kind of a wide net and you look logically at where your sources could come from: zoos, reptile gardens on the western side of the state, and of course, the mayor who took the picture.
Yeah. And Ray, as we're talking about this and you were saying you were asking yourself a lot of questions that you think that viewers would have too, because if you thought it, maybe somebody else reading would also think the question. As you were coming up with these questions and putting it in, did you find yourself ever wondering if, I'm losing my train of thought, but with these questions coming together, how did you want viewers to really connect to this story? Was it just you wanted to find every question that you think a viewer would be asking, or did it become, I want a viewer to stick on this point of the story?
Well, you start out with questions viewers may have, but as you learn more about the snapping turtle, you start to think, oh, wow, this is kind of cool. I think viewers might be intrigued at the fact that, turtles can't really, they're not ready to mate yet, like males, until they're 10 to 12 years old. That's a fact not everybody's going to know or think they know. And then that females can't mate until they're like 12 to 14 years old. So some people may have heard about, the facts of be careful handling a snapping turtle, maybe, approaching it from the back, or just maybe even know that they nest in the spring. But there's other little things about, just reminding people they're basically unchanged for the last 200 million years. So the more I talked with sources, the more information I got, and it became even more fascinating than just why was the turtle there? It's what's the average weight? How long do they live? I mean, all these little tidbits that I can do the research and people can provide me the information for someone looking at this story, and they have a lot more information that they can use or glean from it that they may not have thought of when they started.
And what was a tidbit that really sticks with you now after the publication of the story?
I think, one of the things that I didn't mention was the mayor telling me that he had, as of Monday morning, gotten 250,000 views on his Facebook post,
Wow.
which tells you about there's interest in the snapping turtles. and also, I think just that, the age span is maybe 40 to 50. I'm kind of breaking even there with a couple of things, but that they can live longer. I thought that was fascinating because, again, these are reptiles, or I think they're amphibians, I'm sorry, that basically haven't changed much in 200 million years and can live almost, to middle age if you think about it in a person's lifespan.
Wow. Again, I can't credit you enough for all the information that you put into this story. It really is great and just fascinating to read. So is there anything else you'd like to share about creating this story or what you've learned about snapping turtles or anything like that?
Well, yeah, thanks for the credit on the sources, because this was one of those stories that it's not necessarily out of the norm, but you don't always get to do a snapping turtle story, maybe once a year. So it was incredibly fun to do in terms of it's a chance to learn, but it was about something that's, hey, it's a snapping turtle, and it's part of the ecosystem of Aberdeen, but there's, across the state of South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota, there's snapping turtles. So that made it even more fun because you had the potential that people could at least relate to some pieces of the story right off the bat.
Excellent job, Ray.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you for joining me at the digital desk. And still to come on Inside the Newsroom, we're bringing another reporter in to talk about a story that was trending online on Monday. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Inside the Newsroom. Up next, we have a digital reporter in talking about Trump's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill and its potential ties to South Dakota. Joining me now is our digital reporter, Jacob Newton. It's just a digital reporter day. We had Ray Yost come on earlier. Now it's you, Jacob.
Absolutely. Good to be here.
It just makes sense with the digital desk.
Absolutely.
You did a story yesterday that's talking about some money that could potentially go into South Dakota's statue garden. And this is within the One Big Beautiful Bill. Can you talk a little bit about what your story was?
Yeah, so this bill, also known as H.R. 1 of the 119th Congress, part of it would allocate $40 million to establish what they're calling the Garden of American Heroes. And this is something that Trump has signed executive orders on 3 times, once in 2020, 2021, and 2025. Now, in that bill, the location of the garden is not specified. It just says $40 million towards establishing and maintaining this garden. Now, both Governor Larry Roden of South Dakota and South Dakota's representative in Congress, Dusty Johnson, have both said that they would like to see the garden in South Dakota near Mount Rushmore has been mentioned as a location, but at this point, a actual location is not in the bill.
One thing I appreciate about reading your story, Jacob, is you make that very clear, that the location and its potential location in South Dakota is just not set in stone yet, as you had put it. And you had said, like, first, here's this reason, and second, here's this reason. Why do you like to uncover those types of details and just make it very clear that this is not yet set in stone, for this example, purposefully?
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of give that context to the situation. It's really easy for people to kind of put the cart before the horse, get out ahead of themselves with what's happening. And so exactly in this sort of situation, not only is the location not expressed in the bill, but also the bill has not technically made it through Congress. It has passed the House, but it did so by only 1 vote, and 2 Republican members who did vote for that bill later admitted, and that's Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia and Mike Flood of Nebraska, that they had actually not read the bill. And had they done, they said there were parts in it that they would not have supported and that they would not have voted to pass it. So Moving on, though, the bill has to go to the Senate still as well, where it may face changes, it may be amended, and if that is the case, if it does make it through the Senate amended, it would then have to go back to the House to face those same legislators to then be reapproved before it could be passed again, reconciled, and sent to the president.
Great points that you just made, and that's all included in your story, Jacob. And I want to talk about your storytelling for a second. One thing I like to tell you a lot, and I compliment you on, because I just love it when I read your stories, is your tone that you use and how it's expressed through your stories. How important do you believe it is that your voice comes through in your stories, even if it's a story about national politics that kind of becomes localized like this?
Sure. I think there's something that a lot of journalists can kind of fall into, especially. I mean, I came from a broadcast producer before I was ever a reporter, and that's writing a lot of scripts, kind of processing a lot of scripts. And I think it can be easy when moving into digital and kind of doing some longer format things to kind of still write with that TV style, you know, those one lines, one line, one line. But I think it's important when kind of writing, especially for digital, to kind of use a more conversational voice to help draw the reader into the story and make it feel like it's less of me kind of spitting lines at you and more talking you through what is happening, what the context is, and what the story is. And I think that makes it easier to understand, easier to remember, and then hopefully easier to share with others.
Do you, when you write, do you have or envision like an audience member or just like that one person that you hope your story reaches? Do you think about that when it comes into mind of like this conversational tone that you like to adapt?
I wouldn't say necessarily a specific person, but I would say I do kind of write in kind of a stream of consciousness almost, which obviously takes some editing because you can't just put what you think onto the page and then send it out. But it is very much of a conversational thing. If I was going to just sit down and explain this topic to someone, where would I start? How would I say it? What would I put in to help understand along the way? And then it's kind of going back through and getting rid of some of the stuff you don't need, things like that.
I always think of it, I relate to this a lot. I think of it like table talk. Like if you're sitting down for dinner, how would I explain this to like my 18-year-old brother, something like this? And I think you adapt that with your tone. What story are you working on today?
Yeah, I'll be previewing tonight's city council meeting here in Sioux Falls, where councilors will be presenting first readings of proposals to have city elections and school board elections on either June or November for these next upcoming races. And that is, I believe, the result of a new state law having municipalities set those elections.
Yeah, you know, this is a story that we've been covering with the KELOLAND digital team for quite some time, and I'm going to reference one of the stories that I published about a month ago. This was on March 31st, where Republican Governor Larry Roden had signed HB 1130. This is the new law that we're looking at that will be switching those school board and municipal election dates to either June, which would be a primary, or November, which would be a general election. But this law doesn't go effect until January 1st. But again, that first reading will be tonight, and Jacob will be uncovering that story, and you can watch that tonight on the KELOLAND newscast. Jacob, is there anything else that you would like to share, either about the story that you're creating tonight, or the story that you created yesterday, or just your storytelling in general?
Well, when we look at the story for today, of course, this is just a first reading, and as it currently stands, I have one city councilor lined up to speak on this. That'll be at 1:30 this afternoon. I'm hoping to hear from the other three because there are two counselors sponsoring each of these proposals. But the big thing to note is that this is just a first reading. Nothing is likely to be decided at this point. This is just kind of getting that out there to the public so people can hear the proposal, ask questions, understand what each of these are saying.
Wonderful. Jacob, thank you so much for joining us at the digital desk, and stick around with us. We'll have more after the break. That's all the time that we have for Inside the Newsroom. Thank you for joining us on our second day of our show, officially launching on KELOLAND Plus. And thank you for watching on KELOLAND Plus. We're offering lots of special programming, live streams of our evening, and all of our newscasts. And we even have a program called Eye on KELOLAND Rewind that only airs on KELOLAND Plus. You can watch that on Mondays at 6:30 at night. It's only on Mondays, as where Inside the Newsroom is every day at 1 o'clock. So we'll see you again tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Until next time, have a great day, everyone.